Story 1. They said they stayed up for a full week taking Adderall to finish a big work project and ended up so messed up that they were having vivid hallucinations, many of which were of me. As a result, he couldn't continue seeing me because he could never be completely certain that I was real. Story 2. He said, I am so deeply in love with you that I don't think I can ever move on if you left me. So let's end it. Story 3. My high school boyfriend broke up with me because I wasn't metal enough for him. As a 17-year-old metalhead, it was devastating. Now it sounds ridiculous. Story 4. She broke up with me because I chewed too confidently. Not loudly, not with my mouth open, just too confidently. Apparently, my bite radius gave off alpha energy and made her uncomfortable. I didn't know I was out here threatening egos with my sandwich skills. Story 5. His dad didn't like me, so he told my ex that if he continued to date me, he wouldn't keep paying for his college. So he ended the relationship for an education, which I understand and I'm okay with. It was just a power move on his dad's part. Story 6. I was in high school, so take this with a grain of salt, but I didn't try his mother's spaghetti and meatballs. I'm allergic to tomatoes. Story 7. Because his mother found him someone prettier to date, they got married a year later on my birthday. His mother sent me the invitation with a note that said, just so you know. Story 8. My ex-wife left because I was unhappy that she was seeing other men. My ex-girlfriend left because I wouldn't have a child with her after dating for a few months. I avoided some challenges in my younger years. I have the perfect wife now and couldn't be happier. Story 9. My ex broke up with me due to my height. She questioned it even before we started dating, but 2 years later, she said she couldn't get past it. We were the same height. Story 10. I went on a few dates with a guy until he suddenly told me that his mother had said I was a gold digger and that I needed to start paying for all the dates, buying him presents, gas, and groceries to prove I wasn't one. I made over twice as much money as he did, and neither of us made very much. If I were a gold digger, I would be incredibly foolish. I laughed and told him that his accusation and request were ridiculous. I said I didn't want to see him anymore if he was serious. He then mentioned that he actually wanted to stop seeing me because I was not black, and he wanted his children to have 2 black parents. So he was upset that I wouldn't let him be the gold digger and also that I wasn't a different ethnicity, despite him being the one who reached out to me initially and clearly seeing what I looked like. Story 11. Not me, but I would be remiss not to mention the woman who ended a good friendship with mine after a 3-year relationship and cited Mercury being in retrograde as one of the reasons. I am not kidding. Story 12. I forgave her for kissing someone at a bar before we became official. 9 months later, she said she didn't respect me because of it and wished I had ended things because of it. Story 13. She wanted to explore her sexuality towards women, which is fine, but not with me and not in the future either. Regardless, she wanted to break up. She mentioned that she had been with a man less than a week after our breakup and multiple other men afterward. Not a single woman except for one incident at a club. 3 months later, she told me she really needs to start dating women soon because the men she had been with had all been awful. Story 14. Her ex got another girl pregnant, and she wanted to get back with him to help raise the baby. According to social media, they are married with 3 children, none of whom are hers. I feel I dodged a really strange bullet. Story 15. I just got out of a serious relationship and I don't want to jump right back into one, said the girl who pursued me, asked me out on dates, and would take me home on occasion. My response was, okay, whatever. Don't ever call me again. Story 16. I got dumped for sending out Happy New Year texts to more people than just the guy I was seeing at the time. Story 17. Because I was too nice to her. Poor girl. She grew up in an extremely abusive family and then moved on to an extremely abusive partner. She couldn't handle the fact that I treated her with respect, dignity, and kindness. Her words, not mine. I miss her every day. Story 18. He snooped through my old journal and saw that I had been sexually assaulted as a teenager. He was angry that I had lied about how and when I lost my virginity because I had told him about my first voluntary experience instead. Story 19, because he thought he had COVID, it changed his brain chemistry. This is why he yelled at me. We are over. In the middle of the airport at 3 a.m. Story 20. He wanted me to meet his mom while she was in town to visit him. She told me I wasn't right for him because I was not leading a life with God and was not what her son needed. She is a Utah Mormon, and I was raised Catholic. He broke up with me to listen to his mother. It was a good thing I got out of that situation. Story 21. An ex-girlfriend left me because she thought I was having relationships with other women while I was in Denmark working. I live in Sweden and work 12 to 13 hours a day, so I had time only to shower, eat, and sleep. I later found out that she was the one involved with someone else while I was away. Story 22. I got hit with the comment that people wonder how a guy as unattractive as me can be with someone like you. I've never truly recovered from that, and when I told my therapist, he laughed with me about it. Story 23. My ex was a mechanic. A customer offered him a favor to fix her car for free. He broke up with me to avoid cheating. At the time, I was devastated. Looking back, good for him for not being unfaithful. By the way, he fixed her car, and she did not follow through on her offer. He came back and asked me to return, and I did, but after a couple of months, I realized I had made a mistake and broke up with him. Story 24. During COVID, it seemed that Black people were more susceptible to the virus. He kept a distance of 2 feet from me and then said he was leaving. It was the best thing ever. Story 25. I showed emotion. She asked me about the time my family lost our home due to a neighbor causing a fire, and I became emotional. It hadn't been long, and I was still affected by the experience. I left the room briefly to collect myself, and when I returned, she seemed different. She was never the same after that conversation. I believe I made her uncomfortable, and we broke up not long after. Story 26. She broke up with me because she said I was jealous, insecure, and controlling for asking questions about her excessive texting with an online friend. I found it ridiculous to text someone 100 to 200 times a day while having your partner next to you on the couch. She thought it was unhealthy that I asked her to text him less. She broke up with me and went to him before the end of the week. Story 27. A coworker asked me out for dinner after work, near the start of our shift. I accepted. About an hour later, she asked for my birthday. When I told her, she responded, "Oh my God, you're a Sagittarius?" and then drove home. We never went out. A few weeks later, when I tried to call her for business reasons, I discovered that she had blocked my number. This was my first time attempting to contact her via my phone. Story 28. I had a date with a girl, and she turned me down because I didn't look enough like a singer from a band she loved. To be fair, she was 17 and I was 19 at the time, but I thought it was hilarious. Story 29. I stopped seeing someone because they were eating with their mouth open. I had to end it immediately, and I did. Edit. I didn't read the question properly, but here you go. Beware of open-mouth eaters. Story 30. Serious and ridiculous. My best friend, who had never shown any signs of being racist, publicly ended our friendship because I was dating a person of color. Funny and ridiculous. I had an ongoing joke for years with my high school ex about how neither of us knew why we broke up. One day, we just stopped being a couple and spent the rest of high school pretending to be the confused divorced parents of our friend group. Story 31. This was a few years ago. We dated for about 2 months. She ended things because I didn't go to college. She wanted someone who could understand the challenges she faced while attending college. I suppose my struggle of growing up in poverty, with college not even being an option, and having to work low-paying jobs to avoid homelessness, didn't compare to what she experienced. It was probably for the best that it ended when it did. Story 32. I set my phone to record while I was chatting with his friend in the kitchen. He interpreted my breathy chuckle and my soft conversation about my sister being pregnant as me cheating. He thought his congrats was for a job well done on my part. I have no words. The frustrating part is that I still love him, and he is spreading rumors about me. If I were to cheat, which I would never do, it certainly wouldn't be when he could walk in at any moment, and definitely not with his friend. Story 33. My best friend of 7 years got a boyfriend. We started hanging out less frequently. I would ask her to get together, but every day was reserved for time with him. When we finally did hang out, she expressed her disappointment in me, saying I was there for her sadness but not her happiness. When I explained that I didn't realize she needed me, she responded, "Friends shouldn't be needed. They should only add to your life." She claimed I disappeared and was nowhere to be found. When I tried to mention that I had made an effort to hang out, she said I was making excuses. I'm happy for her and her relationship, but that friendship breakup was hard for me. Story 34. Because he loved me and he didn't want that at the time. He is now 64, divorced, and disappointed with life. I am 62 and have been happily married for almost 30 years. Story 35. His parents didn't like black people, so after a few months, he opened up about that and we ended it. Thankfully. Story 36. She was a Catholic and I am an atheist. She read James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a young man and became fearful of hell, which led her to break up with me. Story 37. I'm sorry, I don't find board games as exciting as you seem to do. Yes, I'm a big board game enthusiast. However, we had a discussion about this before, and I do not expect her to engage in my hobby more than she wants to. Ironically, we spent the rest of that evening playing a board game that she gifted to me. Story 38. She just wanted to be with other people. We were 23. She ran off with someone from a different background and then returned after he mistreated her for being unfaithful. Now she's 50, divorced, because she was unfaithful to her husband as well, and now lives on her brother's couch. She was the only person I ever told to leave my place and never return. I have no idea where she is now, and I don't care. Story 39. Ex left me because I didn't give her all my time. She called me selfish because I had to be at work and had goals for advancement. Story 40. She wanted to sleep with a heroin addict. It lasted less than 3 months. We had been together for almost 3 years. Story 41. I rehomed a dog that I didn't have time to care for properly, but I found her a really good home. My friend who ended our relationship called me selfish. I just worked too much and felt bad that the dog was inside all day with no one to play with. Story 42. We had a good 4-month phone relationship. He came home and had a great first week. He dropped me off at my home and said he would be back later, but then he stopped contacting me for weeks. The next time we saw each other, he said I had upset him and invalidated his feelings. I didn't remember it, but I apologized. We texted for a few days and then went back to no contact again. Story 43. She wanted to be with her colleagues, thinking I would be okay with it. She had already been involved with them for a month before mentioning it to me. No problem, there's the door. I instantly blocked and deleted her from my life and never looked back. 6.5 years later, she tried to approach me when we encountered each other in public. Not a chance. Story 44. I got stuck in traffic and was late despite keeping her updated the whole time. I think I avoided a difficult situation. Story 45. I am considering ending my relationship with a girl because she believes that men should pay for everything to protect her femininity. It is exhausting dealing with this mentality. Story 46. As you get older, you will realize that the reason does not matter. It is an excuse, and if they want to leave, then you should too. If you have to fight to maintain a relationship, you are no longer truly in that relationship. Story 47. Her family did not approve of me. We were together for many years, but when we began discussing the topic of children, her family pressured her to end our relationship because I was from a different culture and ethnicity. They believed it would be shameful for her to have children with someone outside their cultural or ethnic group. Story 48. I didn't like the Insane Clown Posse. If you don't understand my music, you don't understand me. I laughed and still do when I think about it. Story 49. Some broke up with me for being overly optimistic. I try to face the day with a smile and make the best of any situation. Apparently, he didn't like that I could see the positive in what he considered misfortune. Story 50. I was dating a transgender woman for about 6 months, which ended in a massive fight because, unbeknownst to me, my name was her previous name. Until that point, I had never asked or cared to know her previous name, and she never shared it with me, so all of this came completely out of the blue. She demanded that I legally change my name. I just laughed, and that was the end of it. It is completely unreasonable. I am not changing my name, and why would you date me if my name made you that uncomfortable? Story 51. I gave her multiple orgasms every time we had sex. I didn't do anything special or different from anyone else, but she felt that each encounter was too overstimulating for her. I figured it might be her anatomy and that she would have this issue with other guys as well, but she actually messaged me about 3 months ago asking if I was still available, so maybe not. Story 52. In the case of friendships, I have autism and attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder. Many people love to brag about how tolerant they are, but in moments that matter, they often are not willing to be around neurodivergent individuals. Story 53. I was dumped on Christmas night because we were watching a show where the guy didn't hold the door open for his date. I noticed that the guy I had been seeing didn't do that for me, but I didn't care. I just recognized the pattern. I asked if there was a reason he didn't hold the door open, and he said it was because he had to go in first to ensure the place was safe. He went to the bathroom and came back, saying he would never be the man I wanted him to be, so he thought we should break up. I told him to go ahead and leave if he was planning to. Story 54. When I worked as a restaurant chef in the evenings and on weekends, I had 2 girls leave me for the same reason. I never see you. You're always working. I understood the first one, but the second one I met at the restaurant where I was working as a chef while she was working at the bar. Story 55. My friend was dumped by her ex-boyfriend because her hair was too thin. They had been together for a year. Story 56. She received a speeding ticket. On her way home from my place, she was pulled over and issued a speeding ticket, which she interpreted as a sign that she shouldn't see me anymore. I decided it was probably best to let her believe that. Story 57. They didn't want to be in a relationship with me, so I didn't force it. I figured the world is big enough, and maybe I would find someone who wanted to stick around. This led to a lot of fake breakups. They wanted to test me to see if I would fight for our love, which I didn't. Then they got mad because I didn't grovel. This happened at least 3 times. They ended up breaking it off with me because I wasn't committed enough. I've never cheated or anything. I just didn't want to fight for someone who played games. Story 58. I have a serious reason for breaking up with someone. This man physically, mentally, and emotionally abused me. He spat in my face, threw drinks on me, pushed me down the stairs, held me hostage, slashed my tires, and cut wires under the hood of my car. The verbal abuse was overwhelming, but I didn't end it until he made fun of Robin Williams' suicide. That was the final straw. Story 59. I had a girl who was upset with me for not driving home from a trip we took. I offered to drive twice, but she declined both times. Story 60. We had a friend who started dating my brother after amicably breaking up with her ex. The ex was nearby for some errands and had a friendly lunch with my wife while everyone else was busy. He stopped by to say hello afterward. This girl reacted extremely negatively. She spent half an hour complaining about how her boundaries had been crossed, despite us having no reason to believe this would be an issue, as she had been encouraging the friendship. She demanded that my wife not speak to her. Unfortunately, we had lent them an inflatable mattress that we needed back for a friend who was visiting. My wife sent her a text asking if she could at least retrieve it in the meantime, which led to another escalation about disrespected boundaries and abusive behavior. This girl and my brother spent the next week harassing my wife and accusing her of being an alcoholic and abusive over what was essentially nothing and completely unexpected. The sudden betrayal and hostility drove my wife to attempt suicide. I had to physically wrestle the knife from her hands. Out of desperation, I called my brother asking them to stop and put an end to this, and he initially seemed reasonable. He talked with his girlfriend and called me back about 15 minutes later, telling me to leave him alone if I was going to continue to enable an abuser. We have barely spoken since then, and he has more or less cut ties with every friend and family member from before he started dating her. All of this was sudden and completely out of the blue. Half a decade later, we are still left wondering what actually happened. Story 61. He said this beautiful stray cat would be better off under a tire. I could never look at him the same after that. Story 62. I didn't believe in the concept of soulmates the way she did. I believe soulmates, if there is such a thing, are something you work towards, built over many years together. She thought it was a cosmic meeting of two people destined to be together, and if you have an issue with the other person's actions, such as hurting you with their choices or becoming an alcoholic, then that means you don't love them enough and aren't really soulmates. She saw it as a blank check for terrible behavior. 17 years of my life I won't get back. Story 63. He wanted me to act more tsundere but completely shut down any time a small amount of confidence or assertiveness was shown toward him. Story 64. She didn't like my haircut. If given 1 week, my hair would have grown back and could have been cut differently. I dodged that bullet, though. Story 65. She called me the root of all evil after she wanted to open our marriage, then got upset when I went out with an old female friend. The friend got drunk and tried to kiss me. She was staying with us in the spare room while I slept in a different bedroom from my ex-wife. Nothing happened between my friend and me. My ex-wife asked me why I didn't stop the friend, and I told her, because you wanted to open the marriage. My friend and I had always been a bit flirty with each other, and you knew that, yet you still insisted I go to the bar. We didn't sleep together, and she was the one who tried to kiss me. Story 66. He broke up with me before work while I was upset about feeling very lonely away from home, then proceeded to tell me that the chase was the thrill. Story 67. She left me because I broke a defined boundary of her initiating physical contact. What boundary did I break? Could it have been a significant kiss or grabbing her in public? No, I just held her hand during dinner. Story 68. One friendship with a bandmate ended because some of my other friends did not say hello to him at one of my performances. We played electric drums on stage and I told him he did not have to play, but he said it was too late. Story 69. I worked full-time while also attending college and living independently. When she commented that I was too busy and ambitious, I simply agreed and continued managing my job, coursework, and independence. We went our separate ways. Shortly after, she started dating someone who wasn't very motivated, and after a while, she became bored and reached out to me again. I told her I was too busy. We laughed about it, and that was the end. All she had to do was appreciate that I was busy and ambitious. At one point in our relationship, she said I needed to have a net worth of $2 million so that she could take care of the house. Additionally, she expressed that she wanted to have 5 children. Story 70. My career and career goals were too intimidating. However, he was looking for someone to be a housewife. Story 71. Not a relationship, but a guy told me he couldn't see me anymore because my zodiac sign is Cancer, and he just couldn't handle another Cancer. Story 72. He broke up with me because I beat him at Mario Kart too many times. He said it was humiliating to be blue-shelled by his own girlfriend. Story 73. Because I was worried about retaliation from an abusive ex after he went to court, I should have changed my mindset and thought more positively about it. Story 74. One of the reasons my ex-boyfriend broke up with me is that I wanted to use a condom during sex because I was afraid of getting pregnant. He said I needed to loosen up because he didn't think he should have to wear a condom when he was in a relationship with someone. Story 75. I had an ex leave me because she believed another guy was interested in her. When it turned out he had no interest in her, she blamed me for it and left. Story 76. She ended our relationship after I became upset about her lying to me and moving in with friends she used to be intimate with. She now claims that I have borderline personality disorder. On the day she broke up with me, she met a guy I knew from the local music scene, and it seems she got close to him immediately. Story 77. I had a boyfriend in college who broke up with me because he didn't like the way I ate pizza. I sometimes take a bite out of the crust first. By the way, I paid for the pizza. Story 78. I briefly talked to a girl who wanted to go on an adventure date and asked me to plan it. I texted her the day of the date, suggesting we go geocaching since she mentioned she liked puzzles and scavenger hunts. I received a reply saying, "That's boring, and I don't like your car. I'm breaking up with you. Don't ever contact me again." I definitely dodged a bullet there. That was the last time I used online dating. Story 79. I don't ask for reasons. It's because they didn't want me, and I don't want women who don't want me. I only like women who are attracted to me. Story 80. I am not sure. Nothing comes to mind. However, I want to say that people have unusual reasons they express. But the fact is that something within them wants to leave. I do not want to stop them or disrespect that. Story 81. I saw an article about a new transparent fish being discovered and showed it to my first boyfriend. He became extremely upset and we broke up for a while. I refer to him as my boyfriend because he later discovered that he was transgender and did not tell me until later. The conversation about the fish escalated from, "Don't ever mention the news to me," to, "The news is always negative," to, "There is too much news about politics against the LGBTQ+ community." This explains why he didn't want to hear anything at all. In the end, we broke up because, despite supporting the LGBTQ+ community, I am not a lesbian and found it challenging to be with someone who frequently wanted to borrow my sundresses. As a result, I was called a bigot. Story 82. She shushed me while watching TV. I was watching a reality show where men compete to join mixed martial arts. It was just two men showing off while I was trying to figure out our plans for the weekend. Story 83. Because I posted many stories about One Direction and Harry Styles, who is my favorite singer, he said I like Harry Styles more than him and ended it. Story 84. She smoked marijuana and told me it was laced with dimethyltryptamine, which gave her a religious awakening, so she could no longer engage in lesbian behavior. This happened after 2 years. I am not joking. Story 85. Because he needed to focus on scaling his artificial intelligence startup, he returned 2 years later as if nothing had happened. I'm guessing his startup failed. Story 86. I discovered that he belonged to several private social media groups where people shared inappropriate memes, requested ratings, and posted suggestive pictures on theme days, which women would fawn over. This was in addition to him being broke yet subscribing to an adult content platform. This occurred after we had a conversation in which I made it clear that I would not tolerate any infidelity or similar behavior. He was fully aware of my feelings on the matter. When I confronted him, he delivered an emotional response and then turned it around on me, claiming he wouldn't be with another insecure, controlling partner who scrutinizes his online activity. He now creates poorly edited attention-seeking videos on a popular video-sharing platform. He is 40 years old. Story 87. My ex-boyfriend wanted to get back together with his ex-girlfriend because she reached out to him after they had been broken up for almost 2 years, saying she missed him. He wanted to get in good with her family because her stepfather had a lot of money, and he thought he would somehow benefit from it. He told me he wanted to marry her and inherit that money. After 6 months of living with her, they broke up for the second time. He ended up getting arrested and moved out of state. He called me to give me this update and proceeded to tell me it was never about the money. All lies. Story 88. She wasn't particularly religious, but when we became serious, she soon broke up with me, stating that she always knew she would have to be with someone of her faith. I suspect she was looking for an excuse, and that was the reason she chose. I genuinely believed we were in love. Oh well, it was a long time ago. It's all good. Story 89. When I was in college the first time, I casually dated a guy I met on a dating site. We lived in the same state, but he was about an hour and a half's drive away. I don't drive for personal reasons, but I wanted to mention that. Anyway, this guy and I dated for a little while, and things seemed good between us until one day I received an email out of the blue telling me he was ending things because, and I quote, he didn't want to feel obligated to drive up to see me every weekend. Those were his exact words. I understand the distance was an issue for him, and he was doing all the traveling so far, which could be a bit of a drag and surely a financial drain. But what strikes me as ridiculous is how he worded things and chose to communicate it by email. I never thought I'd want to see him every weekend. I wouldn't have wanted to. I was young, a bit wild, and I valued my independence. But he assumed that I'd want him to make that trip often without even speaking to me about it. Looking back, the whole situation seems pretty foolish. I figure I probably dodged a bullet with that guy, and maybe he did too. Story 90. A guy I went on a few dates with decided he didn't want to continue seeing me for a couple of reasons, but the one that stood out to me was that I didn't like beef. Story 91. Her best friend just became single, so she wanted to be too. It was high school, so we were all silly teenagers. Story 92. I was told I was too much. I responded with, "You're not enough," and walked out. It was the best feeling in the world. He did try to call a few times, but I never answered and moved on. Story 93. I went to my then boyfriend's house, and when I used his computer to open Facebook, I found a search box full of inappropriate content featuring tentacles and animated characters. In shock, I told him that I found that content disgusting, particularly involving animated young girls. He broke up with me, claiming that if he had to choose, he would choose that content. I initially thought it was a joke and laughed, but he was serious. In hindsight, he did me a favor, as it was later revealed that he had abused his stepsister. Story 94. I ended things with a guy I was seeing because I let him into my apartment while I was still in the shower getting ready. When I came out, his clothes were scattered all over my living room because he said he was hot. He could have organized his clothes and respected my space instead of leaving them all over my living room as if someone else would clean it up. It was a major turnoff. Story 95. I texted him and asked if he wanted to go to a remote area in the mountains with me to try to signal an alien spacecraft to fly over us, as one of my friends claimed we could do it. He told me to never contact him again. Story 96. He broke up with me because I am bisexual, and his ex-wife had cheated on him with a woman. It was difficult because I am not a cheater. I never have been and do not want a girlfriend, despite my attraction. Felt pretty unfair. Story 97. My girlfriend in college broke up with me, saying my size was too large. I'm not sure how to respond to that. I just accept it and move on. Story 98. One of my high school girlfriends broke up with me because her parents were going through a nasty separation. She said she needed to focus entirely on that. I thought, that's unfortunate, but you were 17, and it's your parents. What does that have to do with us? I guess the user wanted to make it seem like he won. I blocked him immediately after commenting. Story 99. His aunt didn't like that we were of different races, so she criticized him. He didn't want to face that again, so he broke up with me, saying he guessed he didn't really like me that much anyway. Story 100. To be fair, we were kids and had never even kissed. After about 2 months of being together, I felt like I was the only one taking the initiative to hang out. I decided to stop and see if he would step up and ask me instead. After about a week of not seeing each other outside of school, he texted me, "I think we should break up because we never do anything together anymore." Story 101. He got mad because I was tired of being gaslit and made me feel like everything was my fault. He never listened to what I said, never allowed me to speak, and if I tried to do anything, it felt like there would be consequences. Story 102. A good friend of mine was ended because she packed her boyfriend's lunch and he asked for a slice of garlic bread. She gave him 2. So he ended the relationship because she couldn't follow basic directions. Story 103-1. Distance. We lived a 15-minute drive away from each other. He would rather be with my friend than with me. His size was too large. I wanted to spend time with friends. Story 104. I dated a girl in my freshman year of high school. I started spending all of my free time with her, to the point where, after 6 months, my friends weren't even bothering to invite me to hang out anymore. I missed spending time with my friends, so one day I asked my girlfriend if she wouldn't mind if we didn't spend every weekend together. She immediately declared that I was breaking up with her. Flabbergasted, I tried to clarify that was not at all what I wanted. She disagreed and said she wanted to be a writer and her life needed drama. So it was over just like that. At the age of 14, I think that should have been my first real heartbreak. But honestly, I was too stunned by how absurd it was to feel that upset. Story 105. I retired early, and she couldn't just do whatever she wanted all day anymore. She literally said, "It's better for me if you're at work." That's dumb. Story 106. I couldn't go to one event with them after being together for months and doing everything together. For him, this was a deal breaker as I didn't prioritize our relationship. It was a blessing for sure. Story 107. This happened in 7th grade when I was rejected for being overly enthusiastic, which is ironic considering I was diagnosed with depression a year later, and it has affected me ever since. Story 108. I messaged a guy on a dating site. I didn't hear anything back for months. Then he contacted me out of nowhere, saying he had moved to a city 4 hours away from mine, where he had lived when I initially messaged him. He mentioned that I seemed cool and was always coming back to my city to see friends and family. So why not meet up? So we did. We had a wonderful first date and met up again a couple of weeks later for another great date. We communicated through email, text, and chat in the meantime. He returned to town a couple of weeks after that second meeting, but things felt strange, and then he ghosted me for a week. When he finally reached out again, his reason for ending things was that even though he really liked me and thought we had potential, he couldn't keep communicating and traveling. He said he needed to live in the present in his community. That's fair and wouldn't be unreasonable, except he knew where he lived and where I lived when he contacted me. I understand people can change their minds, but he was so enthusiastic, saying, "Oh, we can make it work. I'm in my city all the time," and then walked it back so quickly that it left me bewildered. Story 109. It was a long-distance relationship and he moved to another town even further away, so he ended it with me. The thing is, the connections to the new town were much better, making it both faster and cheaper for me to travel. He didn't even bother to check before calling me to end things. He could have just said he didn't want to continue. Story 110. I was seeing a guy. We met for a first date, and he was immediately cold with me. At one point, I mentioned it being a date, and he asked me if that's what I thought it was. It was super awkward and weird. During our conversation, I joked about my mom being anti-vaccine and how I was shocked at 18 to find out I had never been vaccinated but immediately got the vaccines then and there. He was still cold and weird after this, even more so. Then he ignored me for a full day. When I contacted him, it turned out the reason he didn't want to see me anymore was because I was vaccinated, and he promised himself he didn't want to be around that kind of energy. It was probably insane of me, but I had an outburst and told him if he wasn't into me, he should just say so, because that excuse is wild. But, in fact, it wasn't an excuse. It turned out he wanted to buy a bit of land and start what I can only describe as a cult. I suppose I just didn't fit his vibe. Wild man. Story 111. This was a friendship, not a relationship. I didn't go and fetch her water for her noodles even though I told her I couldn't get anything, even if I tried. She said she'd never speak to me again and would be mad at me for years if I didn't help her. I kept telling her I would if I could, but I couldn't, and she just left, saying, "Well, I'll go get some water for my noodles since apparently you don't know how to do that." I asked if we were still friends, and she said, "No," and left. Keep in mind she had been awful to me before and had been messing with me mentally earlier that day. But she speaks to me now. Story 112. A girl broke up with me because she was changing employers. She was not moving for a job. It was the same position at different job sites with a different employer. I didn't know we were dating. Story 113. I broke up with him because I didn't trust him with my photos. Turns out I was right, as he showed all of his friends his new girlfriend's photos. She found out, broke up with him, and he posted about it on social media. Story 114. My ex initially broke up with me because she felt I was being overwhelming after she cheated on me, and we were trying to work through the situation. Even after she cheated, she began to emotionally abuse me. We attempted to reconcile, but I couldn't handle it. She then got upset with me for going on a trip that had been planned for us. I mean, come on. Story 115. A friend and I tried dating for a couple of weeks, but she broke it off because she felt I was too nice. As an adult, this translates to "you don't drink at all and I love to," but at the time I wasn't sad because I am very sex positive, and she was unresponsive in bed. Story 116. He felt embarrassed to be with me around friends because I wasn't slim enough. This happened to me more than once. Story 117. I had a stalker who was harassing her. It supposedly went on for 2 years, but she could never get the proof, such as the harassing texts and voicemails. She could recognize the vehicle but only remembered one letter of the license plate. Looking back, it seems far more insane, but she wanted to believe it. This whole situation was the reason we moved apart. Story 118. Not a full relationship, but after a few weeks of dating, we started to discuss what we want and do not want in relationships. I am in my mid-40s and stated that I was not interested in co-parenting. She started crying because she is apparently looking for a father for her 12-year-old daughter, with whom she shares joint custody with the father. Story 119. I have had a few experiences that were difficult. One person ended our relationship because of my race and his fear of what his friends, family, and society would think. He was willing to throw away what we had and his feelings due to the opinions of others. Another person ended things with me because I responded to him in a flat tone and he felt I was not enthusiastic enough. A third person ended our relationship because he had someone else and did not inform me. Story 120. My ex broke up with me because she thought I was too depressed, despite my explanation that I was exhausted from work. She would insist that I come to her house after my shifts, or else she would be in a bad mood and not talk to me for hours. I didn't want to go to her house because she often expected sex or an intense makeout session that I wasn't in the mood for. Looking back, I'm surprised I tolerated it. Story 121. I was 16 and he was 18. It was an online relationship and we met in person once. He decided he wanted to be with my friend, who was 15 and looked much younger, so he ended things with me to avoid feeling guilty. I was more developed than he was. Eventually, he married an adult who appeared even younger than my friend. Story 122. We had a wonderful day together, filled with laughter, and I was in a good mood. The next day, he broke up with me, saying he wished I could be that happy every day and that he needed someone more positive. Story 123. I said a band he loved was decent but not my style of music. We were at the pub and he got up and left without coming back. It was bizarre. Story 124. I was in a relationship with a Muslim man from Iran. He asked me out on a date and we really hit it off. I fell in love fast, and he eventually asked me to be his girlfriend. We had already been dating for almost a year when he suddenly broke up with me over text while I was at work. I was completely blindsided and asked him why. He said it was because he needed to marry a woman from his culture and that his parents would never accept a white woman. He was entitled to change his mind about what he wanted, of course, but I couldn't believe he had known I was from a different culture this whole time. I was heartbroken. Story 125. They wouldn't stop using a racial slur, even though they are not black. It escalated into an argument, which concluded when I presented their voice recordings. Story 126. In my last relationship, he admitted he was with me only because I was disabled. He ended things by ghosting me, and I can't say I miss him. Story 127. A guy ended our relationship because he was worried about how I would treat him in the future once we got used to each other. I had a much stronger personality than he did, but his assumption that I wasn't being genuine from the start was a red flag. What was he hiding from me? He was already in a relationship with someone else. Story 128. In high school, a girl was interested in me and briefly dated me because I reminded her of Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. I don't look exactly like him, but I guess I had Shaggy energy. It's not the worst comparison in the world, to be honest. I misread this as entered a relationship. Story 129. I received a PDF file outlining 3 reasons why he didn't want to continue seeing each other. All the reasons were related to my corrections of his factually incorrect statements about 12 Years a Slave. He worked in film and was explaining the movie to me as we watched it. I had just read the memoir in university and studied it from a historical perspective. He didn't appreciate my corrections. Story 130. I had a girl tell me I wasn't real because I treated her like a human being and didn't abuse her like her previous boyfriends. Story 131. I am bisexual and he said he didn't want his children to be gay. I also dated a guy in high school briefly, just a week. I ended the relationship because he said his BMX bike had exploded and then sent me multiple pictures of himself crying in bed. They were close-up pictures of him crying and throwing his head back in tears. I just couldn't handle the foolishness. Story 132. My ex-wife asked me for a divorce 5 times in a year and a half, and all were unreasonable. First, I stayed with some friends after an argument which she considered manipulative. Second, I expressed my frustration that she had left me alone to play video games when I thought my grandmother was dying. She labeled me as too emotionally needy. Third, I told her I didn't require step-by-step instructions to complete the chores I did every day. She was instructing me on tasks I was already performing as she requested. Fourth, I confronted her about lying to me to avoid running an errand that she didn't want to do, which interfered with my workday. The errand was not essential. Fifth, I asked if we could find a way to arrive on time for events, as she frequently made us late. During our last discussion, I decided to give her the divorce, and she was extremely offended because she claimed she didn't mean it. Story 133, You're not independent enough for me. I lived abroad for 3 years by myself and had been single for 8 out of 9 years before him. Story 134, I was curvy, and he said he preferred very slim women. This was after he pursued me and convinced me to date him, so I'm not sure if it was a negative comment or if he was just confused. Story 135. A woman I dated had a teenage daughter who was quite attractive and was also dating a black guy. From a father's perspective, this young man was impressive. He was going to attend a local engineering college on an academic scholarship and was studying alongside her. She also received a scholarship to the same school, which he and his parents helped her obtain. He was neat and respectful. You could not ask for a better person to date and hopefully marry your daughter. He was also good-looking, and their children would be beautiful. I was dating the mother in this situation, and she broke up with me to reconcile with her ex. What I knew about the ex was troubling. He liked to get drunk and play with guns. He would get drunk and make inappropriate advances toward the teenage daughter. He consistently made racist comments about the daughter's boyfriend. He had been involuntarily committed at least twice. She also had a younger daughter who was likely to be treated just like the teenager in the future. I begged her not to get back with this man, not for my sake but for her daughter's well-being. I was fine with the breakup, but not for this reason. Luckily, I found out a few months later that they did not last long, and I eventually met and married the girl of my dreams. Story 136. She broke up with me because I took a selfie with my childhood friend, and her head was resting on my shoulder. We have been good friends for 15 years. I uploaded the photo to my Instagram story, and her best friend took a screenshot and sent it to her, saying that I am a big red flag. Story 137. We belong to a different community, and our relationship will not end well. She knew our differences from the beginning. Story 138. She said our relationship was just a game to me. I am still trying to figure out what that means. 2 years of giving my absolute best for someone never felt so awful. Story 139. Because I wasn't Jewish, he broke up with me. I handled it calmly and with dignity. He was like my best friend, hilarious and smart, who had been a clown and worked at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A month later, he returned, saying he missed me too much, only to break up with me again 2 weeks later because I wasn't Jewish. Unfortunately, the second time I did not handle it well. The police were involved and I completely lost it. Story 140. They weren't ready for a relationship after we had been dating for 9 months. And they had told me that they loved me and wanted to marry me one day. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.